Hey guys, this is Kyle with Dirt Bike Channel. This certainly isn't a full review of the YZ250X, but it is a chance for us to talk about how it compares to the KTM 300XC, because that's a bike that we have a lot of experience on. So we wanted to share some insights with you on what we think of the 250X compared to the 300XC. Check it out. Hey guys, you're watching Dirt Bike Channel. I'm your host Kyle Brotherson, and I've got Sam Oldham here with me, and we are way out here in the sticks. And we are testing this YZ250X. This is a 2017, right here behind me. Sam has the 2015 KTM 300XC, and we've just kind of been geeking out about how good this 250X is. I just got off of a section of trail that was maybe, I don't know, what would you say, 2 miles long-ish, and it's kind of flowy through the sagebrush. And I can honestly say I've never felt more comfortable on any bike. I've felt as comfortable at times on some other bikes, but I felt as comfortable as I ever have on this thing. I was flowing and it was going. I was steering with the rear wheel. I felt like the front tire was planted. I loved it. What did you think?
Yeah, immediately you feel comfortable on the bike. It feels super light and nimble, which it's laughable because how old is this bike technically?
I mean, it's a 2017, but if we're dead honest, they haven't made really any improvements to this since 06 that we know of. Now, they made a couple little things. You got a little bit bigger brake disc, but this is the same motor. Obviously, they changed the valving. I mean, they changed the gearing just a little bit, and they might have changed the exhaust timing. They lowered the compression on this bike versus the motocross bike, just to give it a little bit more of a linear power band. But all in all, this frame and this motor and this package is 10 or 11 years old, but it is phenomenal.
Yeah, and it literally just carves the corners. It has great power delivery, very well balanced, nothing funny happens. It really is a sweet platform, and I felt really comfortable on it as well, which typically I'm a little more timid, especially since it's a brand new bike. But I really felt like you could just push it as hard as you want, and it would just do exactly what you wanted it to do.
I know everybody seems to love these KYB SSS forks, but most of the guys that say they love them are motocross racers, at least the ones that we read in the magazines. So I tried to set this up a little bit softer, and then I also took one more step. I put tubeless on this 2 nights ago, which allows me to run a little bit lower pressure. So I'm only running 10 pounds of pressure in the front tire. If I run 10 pounds of pressure with a tube, I will pinch it like that. So I have to run 15 usually. So I'm only running 10 on this with the tubeless, and then I've got my clickers loosened up. I could go a little looser on the compression, but I've got it as soft as I think I need it, and I feel great on it. I feel great. Yeah. Now in comparison to the KTM, because we got the KTM 300 right here, and I know a lot of the viewers are very familiar with those. They've got KTM 300XCs and XCWs. Some of the things that I miss when I'm on the blue bike here. I miss the electric start. It's not a deal breaker, but I do miss it a little bit. The other thing I miss is the hydraulic clutch. When you ride these things back to back, you can tell that the hydraulic clutch is better. It gives you a better, more linear feel. It's like a smoother feel. There were a couple of times when we were in tricky sections where I was behind, I was on this bike, Sam was in front of me, and Sam got over like a root. And I watched him kind of get over it easy, and I had a harder time controlling the power to where I would spin the wheel a little bit because I just don't have quite the control on the clutch on this. So I missed the clutch. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the way it pulls. It just doesn't seem like, with the KTM with the hydraulic, it just seems like you can massage it easier versus just having to just grab it and then it's all or nothing almost. And it's just, whereas this, you almost disengage when you just barely touch on the clutch with the KTM, which is very nice because you can not pull it all the way out, but still have forward momentum and then get the right amount of gas. I mean, obviously, as we ride the bike, we'd be able to learn a little bit more how to handle that, but it isn't as nice as the hydraulic clutch for sure.
Another thing I noticed when I swapped bikes, the first section of our trail actually took us up a pretty steep single track where it was pretty tight, and the gearing on this bike, first gear is a little bit higher than on the KTMs that we've been riding, which is fine. It's just that this bike doesn't have quite as much low end. It's got plenty of power, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the power. it is more like a two-stroke, so you got to get up in the RPMs to make the meat of the power.
Yeah, but what I found was, because I like to ride the 300s in second gear as much as I can and then just modulate the clutch when needed, and I felt like second gear on this YZ250X was there wasn't enough low-end power to pull second gear in the places that I normally am comfortable pulling second gear on the KTM 300, which means I just had to switch down into first gear, which brings me to another little gripe. I'm griping only because I'm seriously geeking out about this bike so much. I need to bring it back down to earth. When I have shifted between second gear down to first gear, I have hit neutral a number of times. It is so much easier to hit neutral on this bike. Did you notice that?
Yeah, that's the first thing I noticed, is that I'd hit neutral, and it drove me nuts. And like you said, the power curve, you know, like any bike, it's something you got to get used to, but there was a noticeable difference between the 300 and the 250. We understand that, you know, this has 50 cc more than that, so it's kind of an unfair comparison. But as far as horsepower is concerned, I'm not going to say that this one is going to make much more. And we all know that Kyle's money gear is second gear, and he brings that up for a lot of good reasons, because for the 300 it's such a good gear, and it pulls just the right amount of power without breaking the rear wheel. And so that's important to keep your momentum. And where this one, shifting isn't that big a deal. And honestly, when you shift down to first gear, it's not like the 300 where it just wants to break loose. It actually has a little bit of pull before it starts to really get into the meat of the power band, so at that point you can say that you could just use first gear more, but your forward momentum is going to be slower.
Yeah, it is. So so the gearing for me between first and second gear, it's a little funny. I do feel really good once I get rolling and get moving in second gear, and then third gear is magic on this thing. They made third gear a little bit closer. I've said this a few times in the GoPro video, but essentially what they did on this transmission is they went with stock motocross gearing for first and second gear, and then in third gear they brought it a little bit closer to second gear. It's kind of like dropping or adding 1 tooth to the rear sprocket is kind of like what they did, and that gear is magic. And then you click into fourth gear and there's a wider gap there. Fourth gear, it's a bigger jump between third and fourth gear. It's kind of like taking away then 2 or 3 teeth on fourth gear, on the rear, to make it even faster. And then fifth gear is in the stratosphere. And I haven't yet been in fifth gear. I mean, I've been in fifth gear. We were on a transition road where I was going in fifth gear, trying to conserve some gas, but I haven't yet really needed fifth gear yet. It's just so high out there. But looking forward to getting to fifth gear.
Yeah, and so with that, it's bringing up a good point. And so maybe in the really gnarly sections where the second gear on the 300, it's kind of that magic gear, it'll struggle a little bit more, but that doesn't mean it won't do it. But out here in the flowy stuff, where that third gear on this bike, where you're in it, it just hums, and it's just the right amount of power to get your traction. It's not too snappy, it's not too low, so it's just a really good feeling bike. And then obviously with the balance of the bike being lighter than the 300 and just the suspension, it really works well.
Yeah, speaking of being lighter, the bike is lighter than that KTM 300, which is, that thing's almost a decade newer. I mean, I keep saying that. This is a 2017, that's a 2015, but the technology in this basically is a decade old. But it feels lighter. It is lighter and it feels lighter. It doesn't make the KTM 300 feel heavy per se, but you notice that there's more stuff bolted onto the KTM. So it's kind of funny. But I didn't dislike that. It's really fun to ride them back to back because neither one is bad. They both have their little nuances.
Right, and it's weird because you almost feel like you're on a bigger bore.
Yes.
And even technically, it's not, it's not that big a difference. But it's just like you feel like you're on a bigger bore. It's not even say a heavier bike, because it's not necessarily feels like. It's just like you get on, you're like, oh man, like you would on versus when we'd get on the 300 two-stroke and get on a 450 four-stroke. It just felt like, oh, this is a tank.
Yeah.
You don't feel that, but you feel like, oh, this is kind of a bigger CC bike.
Guys, we are far from done here. I've got a lot more content coming out on this bike, the YZ250X, and I'll do a full review later on with the bike once I've kind of developed all my thoughts. If you like what we're doing here, please remember to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you on the next videos. Thanks, guys.